For a number of years, many a fan thought J.J. Abrams was the worst thing that ever happened to Star Trek. Then Alex Kurtzman said, "Hold my beer," and showed the world just how low a franchise truly can go with Star Trek Discovery. In the past few days, though, there has been a flurry of rumors suggesting that, like so many other parts of culture this past month, even Star Trek may be healing, as Discovery may be stricken from canon. But are these just rumors and wishful thinking, or is there something more to it? We've reached out to our sources and are about to relay what we have learned. Let's dive in. This video is sponsored by Black Forest Supplements. Paramount is in a state of disarray, especially after Skydance launched their takeover bid, after which point everything has been something of a state of flux. Our sources can only report what they see from their vantage point, and when different sources report different things, because they have different vantage points, that usually means there is infighting and no real consensus internally at the studio, meaning where the chips ultimately will fall down isn't known as of yet. And Skydance, of course, is dealing with the whole studio, but where Star Trek is concerned, they're part of the problem, in that they co-financed and co-produced J.J. Abrams' Kelvin trilogy of movies in the first place, and 2 out of 3 of those were co-written by Alex Kurtzman, so for better or worse, there is a relation there. However, there is now some level of external evidence to suggest that scales are tipping in one direction over the other. So strap in, as we're about to go through the rumors we've heard, and provide the context necessary to understand them, and what this all suggests about where Star Trek is heading, following the rumored decanonization of Star Trek Discovery, a series which I would not hesitate to refer to as both toxic and the antithesis of everything Star Trek stands for. Martin Luther King himself once praised Nichelle Nichols and made her continue her role as Uhura in the original series when she had doubts about continuing, and I have no doubt that if he had seen Discovery, it would have made him cry. Instead of being colorblind, that series is hyper-obsessed with it and gender identity, to the point where that becomes the focal point of any and all messaging, and all the assorted LGBTQIAP+ personnel are even segregated from the rest of the crew, while any male character who doesn't belong to that category falls right in line with weak, feminized and subjugated beta male characters that have been normalized in corporate entertainment for years now, all while the populace is being bombarded with estrogenic chemicals from plastics, junk food and sedentary lifestyles. As a result, testosterone levels have been declining for decades. Moreover, sperm count and strength in men are also decreasing exponentially, with a striking reduction in grip strength among young men compared to 30 years ago. There almost seems to have been a push to make men weaker and more docile, something Vice President-elect J.D. Vance even commented on during his appearance on Rogan.
Well, Zuckerberg has gotten really into mixed martial arts. He's gotten really into jiu-jitsu and really into training. And there's very few things that will turn you into a conservative more than martial arts training. Like there's no way to get ahead other than hard work.
Well, have you seen all these studies that basically connect testosterone levels in young men with conservative politics?
Oh yeah.
So maybe that's what's going on.
Well, there's a certain amount.
Maybe that's why the Democrats want us all to be, poor health and overweight, is because that means we're going to be. No, it means we're going to be more liberal, right? If you make people less healthy, they apparently become more politically liberal. That's an interesting observation.
Luckily, there is hope, and of the kind that will augment exercise and vice versa. Black Forest Turkesterone with Tongkat Ali limited edition supplement has been dubbed the feminization killer, since it combines 2 of the most potent natural testosterone boosters on the market. 1. Turkesterone is a natural anabolic compound that supports muscle growth, improves endurance, and boosts testosterone levels. The other, Tongkat Ali, is an ancient potent natural herb that has been used for thousands of years to increase testosterone levels, improve libido, and reduce stress levels. In short, this supplement is just what is needed in a culture that for years has gone out of its way to normalize weakness by pushing specimens like these as role models. You need to get it soon though, as it is limited edition, and once it's gone, it's gone. But since Black Forest sponsors this video, we naturally have a deal for you. If you go to the link in the description, you can buy 2 and get 1 for free. The offer is only valid for 48 hours though, so get yours now. With that, let's get back to the rumors of Discovery, Alex Kurtzman's magnum opus, being removed from Canon. Kurtzman oversaw more Star Trek series than Discovery, of course, but he had significantly less to do with some of the others, like Strange New World, Season 3 of Picard, and the animated Lower Decks. After making sure the girl boss in the front and center of it ticked all the right boxes and scored high enough on the Mary Sue chart, he mostly left that for the showrunners to run as they saw fit. But due to the bad will from Discovery, that resulted in yet another Trek series with no audience and no fanbase to speak of. As my colleague Tom Connors has often relayed, when it was first revealed to the world at the Star Trek event in Las Vegas that he attended, everyone cleared the room when it was announced because no one cared. Indeed, the whole series just concluded last week, and it ended like it begun, without fanfare, because it has no audience to speak of to either mourn its loss or speak highly of memorable moments or episodes. The only reason why anyone is even talking about it now is because it contains a scene which suggests Discovery may have been stricken from canon. Longtime watchers of Midnight's Edge will of course know that Discovery was never canon, in that it never shared continuity with classic Trek, even if the Kurtzman regime labeled it as taking place in the Prime timeline. But as we exclusively revealed to the world, the Prime timeline itself is a deception. Before moving on, let's take a moment to elaborate on that to new viewers. Star Trek fans were led to believe that the Prime timeline referred to the continuity of classic Star Trek, with Shatner's Kirk and Enterprise, The Next Generation, Voyager, Deep Space Nine, and the original animated series. But remember, this term was coined by the producers of J.J. Abrams' Star Trek reboot, and as a means to differentiate the Kelvin timeline where that movie took place. But here's the kicker, that movie was made under an alternate license issued by then Star Trek rights owner CBS to distributor and film production company Paramount, which at that time had no legal claim to the classic Star Trek and no rights to make any further Star Trek movies. This alternate license allowed them to make the JJ movies, but so as to not interfere with CBS's revenue from the merchandise of classic Trek. Everything had to be 25% different. That way, Paramount got the merch revenue for their Star Trek, or at least they would have if there was demand for any, while CBS got the revenue stream from all merchandise based on classic Trek. And there's some real demand and real money in that. In other words, this whole Kelvin and Prime timeline nonsense is something the makers of JJ Trek cooked up to provide a story reason why their Trek was so needlessly different, when in reality it was to not interfere with CBS revenue stream from classic Trek merch. Legally, there are only 2 Star Treks, and that is the classic Star Trek and the alternate Star Trek, which is what all Star Trek since 2009 has been made under. Both the Prime and Kelvin timelines are terms coined under the alternate license, which is why Discovery, Strange New Worlds, and Picard and even Lower Decks explicitly can take place in the Prime timeline. It's just marketing BS. And as such, Alex Kurtzman can label pretty much anything he wants as Prime. It still has nothing to do with the legally separate classic Trek. Yes, even Picard, which you will note builds on the events of J.J. Abrams' Star Trek, is also part of this alternate Trek. So even if it has the original TNG cast, it is no more part of classic Trek than Never Say Never Again is an official James Bond movie, even if it has Sean Connery. But that is the legal realities. The people behind the alternate Star Trek license have always been in it to deceive you into believing that there's only one Star Trek with 2 timelines. The Kelvin timeline where the J.J. Abrams movies takes place, and the Prime Timeline, where they want you to believe Classic Trek is, but in reality there's only Picard, Strange New Worlds, Lower Decks, and up until recently, Discovery. And up until now, you've been asked to believe that Discovery will lead directly into the original series. That was of course never true, and Lower Decks just made that explicit. Our good friend Overlord DVD, Doomcock himself, made a video on this very topic while this video was in development, and he references this article from Giant Freaking Robot, a publication which in the past has been used to spread pro-Star Trek Discovery information on the interwebs, and which correctly stated several years ago that Discovery had been picked up for a 5-season commitment. Well, in the last few days, they published the article Star Trek just erased an entire series from Canon, which reads, Star Trek Lower Decks had its big finale this week, and in the process of ending the show, they fixed one of the worst problems Star Trek has ever had. That problem is named Star Trek Discovery, and thankfully, it is no longer part of the official Prime Timeline Star Trek canon. Of course, as we stated, the Prime Timeline has nothing to do with Classic Trek, but the writers of Giant Freaking Robot might not even be aware of that, so let's just go with it. For those who've forgotten, when Star Trek Discovery first debuted, the show existed in the past for the first couple of seasons. It took place in a time between Archer's Enterprise and Kirk's Enterprise, and began by starting a war with the Klingons. The problem is that they made the Klingons look like this, which is pictured in the article. That was just the start of the mess Discovery tried to make of the Trek universe. The show was made with the goal of erasing all Trek that had gone before, and it set out to do that pretty quickly. By season 2, however, the people at Paramount realized this was a horrible idea and not what anyone wanted, so they came up with an excuse to send the show so far into the future that it couldn't do any more damage. By then, they'd already done a lot. Luckily, now it doesn't matter, because the Star Trek Lower Decks finale confirmed that the events of Discovery take place in an alternate reality. Paramount has been clear since the show started that, though it's animated, Star Trek Lower Decks is full canon and takes place in the prime timeline of the Star Trek universe. So, what happens in Lower Decks isn't fanfiction or an alternate universe. In the show's finale, a group of Klingon ships encounters a phenomenon that transforms things into alternate reality versions of themselves. When a Klingon ship hits one of those transformation rays, it transforms into a big, ugly, Discovery-style Klingon ship. This couldn't have happened if those weird Discovery Klingons had ever existed in the prime Star Trek timeline. It means that Discovery and its Klingons, just like the J.J. Abrams Star Trek movies, happened in an alternate universe, one that has nothing to do with the rest of Star Trek. But then you might wonder, what about Strange New Worlds, a series you will recall is a spin-off of Discovery? Well, I can only imagine that someone connected must have clued Giant Freaking Robot in on the answer, for in an update to the original article, they write, "The Enterprise we saw on Star Trek Discovery is not the same one we follow on Star Trek Strange New Worlds. That previous Enterprise, which by the way looks slightly different from the one on Strange New Worlds, is off having continued adventures in the same alternate reality Star Trek Discovery took place in. In our actual reality, of course, Strange New World is also made under that alternate license, and has nothing to do with Classic Trek either. But if the powers that be behind the scenes have found it opportune to declare that Discovery, including the episodes which set up Strange New World, are no longer canon with their prime timeline, and that they've instead confined it to the multiverse of alternate Trek, as Giant Freaking Robot seems to believe, it is well within their rights to do so. The major significance here, though, is that up until this point, we have always been told that Discovery leads directly into the original series and everything that followed it. Now, that was all explicitly undercut by Lower Decks making it explicitly clear that Discovery takes place in a different timeline. Why this sudden change? That they would ever suggest that Discovery, the magnum opus of Alex Kurtzman, is not prime canon, suggests a major power shift behind the scenes. Of course, with Paramount being acquired by Skydance, there was always going to be a power shift, but it is now looking increasingly like it may not have benefited Alex Kurtzman, the destroyer of Star Trek. At the time when CBS issued the alternate Star Trek to Paramount in the first place, the two companies were for all intents and purposes corporate rivals, even though they were both owned by the same corporate entity. CBS didn't care about Star Trek, they just wanted the revenue stream from the merch based on classic Trek, while Paramount hated CBS for keeping that classic merch around, as they felt it undermined their efforts to create their own alternate Star Trek brand. Indeed, that is why J.J. Abrams left for Star Wars. There were no competing corporations undercutting each other with the same brand. But since then, CBS and Paramount have re-merged, and the revenue stream from both classic Trek and the alternate Trek now go into the same pot. A pot that Skydance is on track to take over completely, and that they're already wielding influence over. And that may indeed have influenced what just transpired in Lower Decks, which according to our sources was just used for damage control. For some time now, we have been worried that like CBS before them, Skydance would have no clue about what a cash cow Star Trek can be in the right hands, and just keep paying Kurtzman, with whom they have a prior working relationship, in the mistaken belief that he is doing them a favor, when in reality he is killing their golden goose. But it would appear that it has not escaped Skydance's attention that the revenue from the alternate Trek, managed by Kurtzman, is non-existent to a net negative, while the formerly extensive revenue from classic Trek merch is down by a rumored 90%, again because of Kurtzman's extreme mismanagement. According to our sources, some in Skydance feel that Kurtzman and his crew are insane for pushing something that the audience so clearly do not want for nigh on a decade now, and that their overseers at CBS are blatantly incompetent for having allowed them to do so all this time. Make no mistake about it, Discovery is every bit as much a franchise killer for Star Trek as The Last Jedi was for Star Wars, and according to our sources, more and more behind the scenes do in fact recognize this, which reportedly is why the Lower Decks showrunners were asked to make this subtle message, which of course fans will pick up on. Skydance reportedly wants to save Star Trek, though as of now, we don't know exactly how they're planning on doing this, or how they're going to get rid of Secret Hideout, Alex Kurtzman's production company, which has been so destructive to Star Trek, and which former CBS head honcho Les Moonves reportedly sold a piece of the Star Trek pie to, which is why they have been so impossible to get rid of. However, based on that update from Giant Freaking Robot, it would appear that the only thing that is removed from canon is Discovery, while Lower Decks, Strange New World, and Picard stays. The latter, unfortunately, makes sense, as that builds directly on the Kelvin movies, which Skydance, again, co-financed and co-produced, so I'm not sure I would celebrate the return of Star Trek just yet. More information on this as we get it. But no matter what happens, Star Trek isn't out of the woods yet, as the fallout from Discovery will continue a while longer. Kurtzman was really committed to a Section 31 spin-off series, which he tried to get made for years, before eventually settling on a made-for-TV movie due to be released on Paramount Plus in a month. From what we have understood, it is no better than anything else Kurtzman has overseen, meaning it's shockingly bad, and many are worried about its fallout, though luckily it's a one and done. The bigger worry is Starfleet Academy, a Star Trek Discovery spin-off series taking place in the 32nd century, picking up right where Discovery left off. It is due to be released in late 2025 or early 2026, and Kurtzman already greenlit a second season, as under the regime he's been running under CBS, waiting to see if there are any viewers or audience demand has never really been a thing. The funny thing though is that if Discovery isn't canon, then neither is Section 31 or Starfleet Academy. Clearly, Skydance could have done a better job cleaning house. Question is, will Skydance still allow Starfleet Academy to proceed and undercut any of their other attempts at fixing Star Trek? Or will Kurtzman's reign of terror continue even under new ownership once that clears? As of now, we don't have enough information to make that call, but we would love to hear your thoughts in the comments. And before you go, head down to the description to claim our exclusive time-limited buy 2 get 1 free offer of Black Forest Turkesterone with Tongkat Ali limited edition. Black Forest Supplements is a brand dedicated to bringing traditional masculinity and femininity back, and their Tongkat Ali is a supplement I use myself, as I want to stay fit and strong, as should you. So hurry and take advantage of this amazing 48-hour promo and support me alongside this very based brand.